Strawberry Reservoir is nestled in the mountains of Wasatch County, Utah, within the large Uinta and Ouray Indian Reservation. The entire region is known for its strange and mysterious events, going back for many centuries. The infamous Skinwalker Ranch, for example, is only a short hour drive east from Strawberry. The Skinwalker Ranch itself is also within the boundary of the Uinta and Ouray Indian Reservation. Strawberry Reservoir has been an old family fishing spot since the 1950s, when my grandfather had pulled an old 4-man camper trailer to Charlie's Camp and left it there as a permanent cabin, one of a dozen such cabins. The lease on the spot was only about $20 a year, and the old trailer remained there for the family to use until the reservoir level was raised in the 1980s, when Charlie's Camp was eventually submerged. The region of Strawberry Reservoir is said by locals to be haunted. Many strange events have been reported up there, from UFOs to ghosts to supernatural events to curses on lost Spanish mines. My parents and grandfather had witnessed a massive UFO hovering over Strawberry Ridge in 1975. The UFO was about the size of a football field. Locals had seen it several times and had dubbed it the mothership. Cattle mutilations and other strange phenomena accompanied the sightings. Such paranormal activity in the region continues to this day. Since the camper trailer had always been at Strawberry, we often hunted in the region as well. When I got my driver's license in 1976, Strawberry became a favorite hangout for me and my fishing and hunting buddies. On other occasions, I simply enjoyed the drive up to Strawberry to explore the mountains, sometimes alone with my Irish setter and sometimes with a close friend, Robert or Martin. We loved driving up the old abandoned logging roads in my 1950 Ford F-100 pickup, which, with its flathead 6 motor and tall skinny tires, would outclimb any 4-wheel drive made. One summer weekend in 1978, Martin and I decided to go up to Strawberry to do some rabbit hunting. We had arrived late, but we were still full of energy, as teenagers are. We made dinner in the trailer and sat around playing guitar for a while, then decided to go for a midnight drive up Mud Creek, which at that time was an old logging road mostly used by deer hunters in October. Martin and I both knew the road and the backcountry like the palm of our hands. It had been our family hunting and stomping grounds for years. Despite the dense forest, either one of us could walk out of the area blindfolded and never step off the trail. But this night, something seemed to want us to stay on the mountain and not return to the trailer. The drive up Mud Creek was easy at first, but the higher we climbed, the rougher and more narrow the dirt road became. A recent rain had carved deep ruts into the trail, which was difficult to navigate. But soon we could see the skyline of Strawberry Ridge beginning to appear through the trees. We had almost reached the top of the ridge when we heard a loud and heavy thump behind us. The sound was so loud we could hear it over the motor and felt the vibration in our bones. We looked at each other, then I suggested it must have been a huge rock falling from the side of the slope, which had become loose from the recent rain. We continued our drive up to the ridge. Strawberry Ridge was quite high in elevation, and looking down into the canyons and mountains westward toward Heber was reminiscent of the movie Lost Horizon. There were no homes, no roads or cabins in that region in those days, and the rugged terrain seemed to go on forever into another world. The stars were pristine and bright, and the Milky Way was like a thick band of white fluid spilling across the sky, as its name suggested. The ridgeline runs north and south, and from Mud Creek we intended to follow the ridge to Clyde Creek, the next canyon over to the north. We had only traveled a short distance along the ridgeline when, in the headlights and the trees ahead, we thought we saw something move. Then came another heavy thump. We continued to drive up to the location where we had thought we had seen the movement, and there, lying across the road, was a massive pine tree. The dust from its fall still filled the air. We didn't quite know what to think of it. Had it just fallen over? What luck that we hadn't been there when it did, or it would have crushed us. Martin took a flashlight from his pack and shined the beam along the length of the fallen tree. The tree had not been dead. It was full and green, and in the light we could see that it had been pushed out by its roots, which were fingering in all directions at the base of the trunk. The smell of freshly turned soil filled the air also. We assumed it was a freak thing, that it had somehow become too top-heavy and tipped over, again from the rain. The wind hadn't done it because there was no wind. We wouldn't be driving to Clyde Creek after all. The narrow dirt road was now blocked by a huge pine tree. It was a sheer drop into the canyons on one side and a dense growth of quaking aspens and pines on the other. The only option was to turn around and go back the way we came. Backing up on the narrow dirt road by only Martin's flashlight was tricky, but we finally backed up far enough to turn and head back down Mud Creek. We hadn't driven long when we were again confronted by another huge log lying across the road blocking our way down. This log was sheared of its branches as if it had been turned on a lathe. We now both knew what that first loud thump had been on the way up. We both became nervous and knew it was not coincidence. How could it be? Someone had purposely blocked us from leaving the mountain. On the gun rack, mounted typically behind our heads against the rear window, was my dad's .410 shotgun and his Winchester .32 special rifle, which I always took for hunting. Martin eased the Winchester out of the rack and cocked a round into the chamber. Neither of us were foreign to firearms, having grown up in hunting families of Utah, and while I had been more experienced, Martin had spent a lot of time hunting with me and my dad. Clearly, someone was either trying to scare us or some nut intended on killing us. Either way, we were trapped. I began to back the truck up toward the ridge when Martin said he saw something moving in the trees outside his window. He went for his flashlight, but I knew the beam would only reflect back at us through the window and advised not to roll it down. I kept backing up, following the tire tracks I had previously made, which were illuminated by the white backup lights. We eventually made it back to the ridge and chose an area to sit and think. Martin rolled the window down long enough to put his flashlight on the roof pointing backwards, then turned around and put his back against the dashboard to watch behind us. I watched the front view. As we sat, we surmised all types of scenarios and tried to convince ourselves it was a coincidence that the two logs had fallen on this night so close together. But that thought changed when we both saw something dark running just inside the tree line toward the second log. There was no doubt we had seen it, and it did not appear as a deer or elk and was too fast for a moose and too large for a bear or cougar. The dark shadow seemed to be vertical as a man would be, but much thicker, and it made no sound that we could hear above the running motor. By now I had the .410 shotgun on my lap pointing at the floorboard, but ready to raise and fire if needed. Whatever had blocked the road was now moving in the trees. It must have sensed we were armed because it never approached the truck. Martin and I sat quietly in the cab until the first light of dawn, before we felt safe enough to start moving. On 3 occasions during the night, however, both Martin and I had seen something big as silent rushing through the trees to the east of us. We needed to get off the mountain, and the easiest route in our mind was to go back down Mud Creek. The log that blocked the way was smaller than the whole tree blocking the Clyde Creek Pass, so when the sun finally came up and shined down on us, we proceeded back down Mud Creek with intentions of taking turns chopping through the log with a hatchet, while the other stood guard with a firearm. But no chopping needed to be done to move the big log from the road. Something had already done it for us. As we approached the log, we saw that it had been pulled downward and turned lengthwise, just enough to allow our narrow vehicle to pass through. Seizing the opportunity, I throttled the gas and navigated quickly between the log and the side of the steep slope. After passing the log, now free to return to the trailer, I sped at a dangerous speed back down the winding path to Charlie's camp. Martin and I were both exhausted from the event and went straight to bed in the trailer just as other campers were getting ready for a day of fishing. We later told the story to others in the trailer camp and at the little general store, but no one seemed amused. To this day we don't know what was up there on Strawberry Ridge that had the strength to fell 2 large trees across the road without saws or tools and then subsequently move one so we could slip by. We continued to hunt in the region thereafter and never experienced anything like that night again. Was it a legendary Bigfoot or Sasquatch? Or could it have been something from that mothership my parents and so many others had seen in recent years leading up to that event? I'll always be curious, but I have no intentions of reliving the event to find out. If you've had similar experiences like this, let me know in the comments below.